The Messerschmitt ME 323 Gigant was a German military transport aircraft used during World War II. A powered variant of the ME 321 military glider, it was the largest land-based transport aircraft to fly during World War II. With a wingspan of over 55 meters and a maximum payload of around 12 tons, it could carry vehicles, troops, and heavy equipment over long distances, effectively becoming the world's first self-propelled heavy-lift aircraft. With 213 units built, 15 of which converted from the ME 321 glider, it was used exclusively by the Luftwaffe, seeing service in the Eastern Front and Tunisian campaign as a key asset in the desperate attempt to resupply Rommel's Afrika Korps. The inspiration for the 323 stems from the strategic victory of the Battle of Fort Eben-Emael in Belgium in May 1940, where for the first time Fallschirmjäger troopers had demonstrated the effectiveness of airborne assault using the DFS-230 light glider. The Luftwaffe, spurred by the strategic victory, envisioned using a large version of such an assault glider to serve in Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Great Britain. On October 18, 1940, both Junkers and Messerschmitt received 14 days' notice to propose a large transport glider design. The requirement called for each of them to have the capacity for an 88mm gun plus a half-track tractor, or a Panzer IV medium tank. Junkers' proposal, the Ju-322 Mammoth, reached prototype form, but was eventually scrapped due to difficulties in procuring the high-grade timber for its all-wood construction, and, as was discovered during the Mammoth's only test flight, an unacceptably high degree of instability inherent in the design. The proposed Messerschmitt aircraft was originally designated the ME-261W. Partly borrowing the designation of the long-range reconnaissance aircraft, the Messerschmitt ME-261, it was then redesignated the 263, not to be confused with Messerschmitt's improved rocket fighter design, for which the designation was later reused. Eventually, with a switch in design approach, they delivered the highly successful ME-321 assault gliders. Although Operation Sea Lion never eventuated, the ME-321 saw considerable service on the Eastern Front as a transport and was never used for its intended role as an assault glider. Following feedback from Transport Command pilots in Russia in early 1941, a decision was made to produce a variant of the ME-321 glider as a fully self-powered transport. A few ME-321 glider transports were taken as prototypes for this new project. They had their wings strengthened to take on 4,1164 horsepower, French Gnome et Rhone GR14N radial engines. Initial tests resulted in a modest speed of 210 km per hour, 80 km slower than the Ju-52 transport aircraft. A fixed undercarriage was fitted, which comprised 4 small wheels in a bogie at the front of the aircraft, with 6 larger wheels in 2 lines of 3 at each side of the fuselage, partly covered by an aerodynamic fairing. The rear wheels being fitted with pneumatic brakes and could stop the aircraft within 200 meters. But this C-Series still required the 5-engined Heinkel HE-111 Z Zwilling, or the highly dangerous Vickers-style Troika Schlepp formation of 3 Messerschmitt Bf-110 heavy fighters to tow it, an underwing-mounted Walter HWK-109-500 Start-Hilfe rocket assisted takeoff units to get airborne when fully loaded. Although this version could return to base under its own power once empty, unsatisfied, the Luftwaffe continued development. The V2 prototype became the first to have 6 engines and flew for the first time in early 1942, while still rocket-assisted. Fully loaded takeoff was now possible without towing, and it was quite a load. Their cargo capacity was rated at 15 tons. In terms of heavy equipment, they were each capable of carrying either 2 4-ton trucks, 88mm flak gun with its entire complement of equipment, ammunition, and gun crew, and its half-track artillery tractor vehicle up to 52 drums of fuel, or 130 men. Thus, the V-2 prototype became the final production ME-323D series aircraft. It had a length of 28.2 meters. Its massive semi-cantilever, high-mounted wings had a span of 55.2 meters and an area of 300 square meters. To reduce weight and to save on aluminium, much of the wing was made of plywood and fabric. Its height was 10.15 meters, powered by 6 Gnome-Rhone 14 and 14-cylinder air-cooled radial piston engines delivering 1,164 horsepower each, giving it a maximum speed of 285 kilometers per hour and a range of 800 kilometers. Its service ceiling was a mere 4,000 meters and had a sluggish rate of climb of just 3.6 meters per second. It had a crew of 5, 2 pilots, 2 flight engineers, and a radio operator. 2 gunners could also be carried. The flight engineers occupied 2 small cabins, one in each wing between the inboard and center engines. The engineers were intended to monitor engine synchronization and allow the pilot to fly without worrying about engine status, although the pilot could override the engineer's decisions on engine and propeller control. Initially armed with 2 7.9 2mm MG-15 machine guns in cockpit fittings, the E-Series incorporated 2 more gun turrets in the wings to be operated by the flight engineers, and the unrealized E-1 Waffenträger gunship conversion had a solid nose with a 20mm cannon turret, 2 additional wing turrets plus up to 10 other machine guns, and cannon of varying calibers firing from standard and new waist positions. A bit more on the E-1 later. In September 1942, 323s began being delivered to Transport Squadron 5 for use in the Tunisian campaign. Formed into combat groups for special deployment, they entered the Mediterranean theatre service in November, where they joined the concerted air and sea Axis effort to resupply Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Africa Corps, with the Royal Navy's Operation Retribution having cut off supply by sea by March 1943. The Axis airlift lifeline used almost 500 airframes of both the German Luftwaffe and Italian Regia Aeronautica. Messerschmitt ME 323s joined Junkers Ju-52s and Italian Savoia Marchetti SM 82Cs, flying over 100 missions daily from aerodromes in Naples, Palermo, Bari, and Reggio di Calabria across the Strait of Sicily to Axis airfields in Sidi Ahmed and El Awina, Tunisia. Usually, a dozen or more fighters escorted these lumbering aircraft and their precious cargoes to the African continent. But it was obvious to the Allies where the Germans' vulnerability lay, and Operation Flax, intended to prevent air supply between Italy and the Axis armies in Tunisia, was launched in early April 1943. Spearheaded by Northwest African Strategic Air Force commanded by James Doolittle, a force of P-38 Lightning, P-40 Warhawk, and Supermarine Spitfire aircraft would sweep the straits and down the transports. To highlight the vulnerability of the ME-323 Gigants, on the 22nd of April 1943, a flight of 16 of ME-323s transporting fuel and escorted by 7 Bf-109 fighters were intercepted by a large group of British, South African and American fighters in P-40 Warhawks and Spitfires. In the ensuing air battle, 14 giant transport planes were shot down. This by no means suggested their structures were weak, however. Contrastingly, they were actually known to absorb a great deal of damage when encountering hostile fire, although that characteristic was greatly affected by the flammability of the cargo they were transporting at the time. But it was their great size, slow movement, low ceiling, and complete lack of maneuverability made them very shootable, so they had to be tough. Indeed, the combat survivability of the ME-323 was significantly higher than even that of the Ju-52. The plane was very difficult to set on fire. Even after receiving numerous hits, it continued to fly. During one battle, a B-26 Marauder fired all its ammunition, a total of 4,250 rounds, including incendiary and explosive rounds, from all 9 of its 12.7mm machine guns into a ME-323D. Yet still it arrived in Africa, earning the nickname Leukoplast bomber, the Band-Aid bomber, by its grateful crew. And several RAF squadron combat reports tell of ME-323s lumbering on there, way after the British aircraft had expended all its ammunition. Still, the Reichsluftfahrt Ministerium were alarmed by how vulnerable the aircraft was. Enter the proposed escort gunship version based on the E-1, classified as a Waffenträger, translated as weapons carrier. Its mission was to provide normal 323 cargo formations with heavy defensive protection, with no cargo carrying ability itself. It sported a solid nose with a 20mm cannon turret. 2 additional turrets were mounted in the wings, plus up to 10 other machine guns and cannon of varying calibers, firing from standard and new waist and beam positions. 1.3 tons of armor plating was added across the entire airframe. To operate the weapons, the crew increased to 21. While 2 prototypes were built and tested, the series was cancelled after it was judged that normal single-engine fighters were more effective in the transport escort role. One of the prototypes was briefly assigned to Combat Squadron 200 for operational evaluation, where it flew armed escort for the small number of captured B-17 flying fortresses operated by the Geschwader. Giants delivered 15,000 tons of cargo to the Axis forces before early May 1943. When flax had effectively ceased further flights, this included 96 self-propelled artillery guns and armored personnel carriers, 616 guns, 360 trucks and tractors, and 42 radio stations. It was largely thanks to Combat Group 323, which made 1,200 sorties, that the Wehrmacht was able to quickly establish a line of defense there and hold it for such a long time. But with Africa lost, nearly all 323s were assigned to the Eastern Front, where they were heavily committed over a vast area. While produced until 1944, they were understandably deprioritized, and the majority of the remaining aircraft were destroyed on the ground as the Allies exerted their increasing air superiority at the end of the war. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share with your friends. If you would like to see more like this, please subscribe to the channel.